All right, today we're going to jump into one of the most powerful passages in the Christian scriptures, Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. In just these few lines, it lays out the entire story of salvation, and honestly, it's pretty breathtaking. It's a story about a great reversal, and it all kicks off with a really important question. The whole idea here is built around salvation. But that immediately brings up a huge question. Salvation? From what? I mean, if we don't really get the problem, there's no way we can truly appreciate the solution, right? The writer, the Apostle Paul, starts us off with a very, very grim diagnosis of the human condition. So Paul kicks things off by describing this before state, what humanity is like when left to its own devices, with no divine intervention at all. And his description? It's not like he's saying we were just a little off track or making a few bad choices. No, it was way more serious than that. The main picture Paul paints here is, well, it's pretty stark. He says we were dead. Now, obviously not physically dead, but spiritually lifeless, totally trapped and powerless in this realm of sin, with absolutely no way to get ourselves out. It's a picture of complete and total helplessness. So why? How did we end up in this state? Well, according to Paul, this was no accident. He actually points to three powerful, controlling forces that keep humanity stuck in this state of spiritual death. First, you've got the course of this world. Think of this as the unhealthy culture all around us, the peer pressure and the systems that basically give us a script for how to live without God. Second, there's the passions of our flesh, our own internal cravings and desires that end up calling the shots. And third, he mentions the prince of the power of the air, which Paul identifies as these hostile spiritual forces that are influencing the world. And this whole idea of being enslaved by our own desires, it's not exactly new. Centuries before Paul ever wrote this, the Greek philosopher Socrates was asking the same kind of question. If our appetites and our passions are in charge, can we really say we're free? Paul is essentially saying, yeah, that internal slavery is a huge part of the human problem. So when you mix these three forces together, the external pressure from the world, the internal pull of our own desires, and the influence of these hostile spiritual powers, the end result is what Paul calls being by nature children of wrath. It's a bleak, really desperate picture. But just when it seems completely hopeless, the whole story takes a massive turn. So after laying out this really dark picture of the human condition, Paul introduces this radical, totally unexpected intervention that changes absolutely everything. This is the hinge on which the entire passage, and really, the whole Christian story, turns. And it all comes down to two words. Seriously, these might be two of the most powerful words in the entire Bible. But God. Just two words, but they signal a complete 180-degree reversal. Everything we just heard about being dead and trapped and enslaved is about to get flipped completely on its head. And here it is, the great reversal in a nutshell. The then was a state of death. The now, all because of what God did, is a state of being made alive with Christ. This isn't just a minor improvement, it's a full-on resurrection from death to life. Okay, so let's dig into this after state, right? What does it actually mean to be made alive with Christ? Well, Paul describes it as more than just a single action. It's a complete change in our status, our position, and our entire reality. Paul breaks it down into three specific things God did. First, he made us alive. Then, he raised us up. And finally, he seated us with him in the heavenly places. So think about that. We aren't just rescued from a bad situation. We are lifted up and given a seat of honor with Christ himself. And this is where Paul makes this really profound connection. He argues that in the same way God raised Jesus from physical death, God also raises believers from spiritual death. Our new life is directly connected to the resurrection and ascension of Jesus. Our story gets swept up into his story. So, what's the engine driving this whole incredible transformation? What makes it all possible? Paul gives it a name, grace. And he's super specific about what grace is, and just as important, what it's for. Grace is basically God's rich mercy and great love in action. It's this favor that is completely unearned, totally undeserved. Paul really hammers this point home. There is absolutely nothing any of us could have done to earn it. It is a pure gift, given simply because of who God is, loving and compassionate. And this next part is a really, really critical distinction. Paul says we are saved by grace, not by works, which means our own efforts, our good deeds, they can't earn us this salvation. But then in the very next breath, he says we are God's workmanship, created for good works. So here's the takeaway. We are not saved by our good deeds, but we are saved for them. Grace doesn't just save us from something, it frees us for something new. You know, there's probably no better real-life example of what this looks like than the story of a man named John Newton. His life is just this powerful, living testament to this kind of unearned grace. I mean, Newton himself said his early life was that of an infidel and libertine. He was deeply involved in the horrific slave trade. By his own admission, he was the last person on the planet who deserved any kind of forgiveness. And yet, after this dramatic conversion experience, he encountered what he called God's rich mercy. He was totally transformed, eventually becoming a minister who fought to abolish the very slave trade he was once a part of. And he captured this whole experience in a hymn that, well, you've probably heard it. It's become one of the most famous in the world. When he wrote the line that saved a wretch like me, he wasn't just being poetic. He meant it. He truly saw himself as spiritually dead, lost and blind, rescued only by a grace he knew he did absolutely nothing to earn. His story is a perfect echo of the very journey we've been tracing. And all of this brings us to the final point, the real-world takeaway. See, Paul isn't just laying out some interesting theology here. He's setting the stage for something deeply practical. If every single person is saved by the exact same unearned gift, if nobody can boast or claim they earned their spot, what does that imply about how we should view and treat one another? That's the question this passage leaves us wrestling with.